Well, we're very blessed today on the Orthodox Ethos to have with us a special guest, As you can see, we have with us Father Alexander Logunov and his mother, Marina, who've come from North Carolina to join us on the podcast to talk about someone who is so beloved to all of us and to them especially, and that is Father Seraphim Rose. And we're going to hear today from Marina and Father Alexander about their experiences, their reminiscences of Father Seraphim. Thanks so much for joining us on the Orthodox Ethos, Father Alexander and Marina. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, Father.
Thank you, Father.
It's a joy to have you. We, as you know, and everybody who follows our podcast, we have a special love for Father Seraphim. I was, as many people have been, I was greatly impacted by his life and became a close observer of his life and his writings, and read many of his writings. Actually, the first book I ever read was Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future, before I was barely even knew anything about Orthodoxy. And then I was blessed when I went to Greece to be able to participate in the translation publication of his life and his writings, and St. John's life and writings. So, we've done podcasts, we've done examinations of his teaching and writing and life, but this is the first time we've been blessed to have someone who knew him very closely from the earliest years when he was Eugene, to talk about their experiences and reminiscence. And so it's a great blessing. Why don't we just start with, tell us, Marina, how you came to meet him, to know him, how you came to Orthodoxy, because it's about the same time, if I understand correctly.
That is correct. Was all about the same time, and I happened to see the bookstore next to the cathedral, so I went in and started to ask questions. And he started giving me books, telling me to read. One of the first books he gave me to read was The History of the Orthodox Church by Timothy Ware, which was an excellent book. But he would also, I would go in almost every day before I'd go to work, and he would ask me questions.
Before you got to that point, though, but how did you find Orthodox? You were a Baptist, right?
Yeah, I was a Baptist. I walked out of a Baptist church, let's put it that way. I've never been back. And I would say I knew Russians. And they had talked to me about their faith, about the Orthodox religion, but I had no clue of what it was. Actually, I hardly ever say this. Eugene knew about it, and so did Father Herman Gleb. One night I had dreamt of the Blessed Theotokos, and I had ran into a church, and it happened to be the cathedral. I didn't know it at the time. And I was drawn to her icon in this dream. And I started praying and started making prostrations, which was alien to me as the way I was brought up. And I had a force pull me up, and she had handed me a glass half full of her tears. I turned around and I had such joy in my heart. I've never felt the joy. I ran out of the cathedral, didn't realize it was the cathedral at the time. I ran out of the church there on Tagiri Boulevard, and the sky was a blue that I've never seen before. So I was going to work. I woke up and I said, I know I have to go. I've got to search for this church. So I went, excuse me.
So at that point, you had never been to an Orthodox church and had never really considered Orthodoxy,
never.
Quite. Yeah, that's amazing. And so you had left the Baptist church at that point? You were kind of looking and searching?
No, I wasn't really looking or searching. I was just living my life that I shouldn't live. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
And so as I was going, I had happened to work out on Geary Boulevard. So as I was going one day, I seen the cathedral, and I said, I seen this church. This is the church in my dream.
Wow. It's
So
amazing.
I went. What I did was I found out about the bookstore. I went and talked to them and Eugene at the time. And that's when he started giving me the books. Then I went into church. And when I went into church, there was Saturday night service. And all I seen was this one icon, and it was the joy of all who sorrow. Assured was the one that I had seen in my dream.
Wow.
I knew I was home.
Beautiful.
So I, standing at the back of the cathedral by the doors with my son in front of me.
How old was Father Alexander at that point?
He was 4.
4, okay.
And he was standing in front of me, and on a Saturday night service, you know how the priest or the bishop goes around and he censors the people, the church. And this happened to be St. John. He stopped right in front of me. And he started censoring me, and I started looking around and moving back. I will say he seemed like he was there in eternity. He undressed my soul.
You felt like he could see through you.
He saw through me. He saw what my life was like. He's seen my past, my present, and I know he saw my future.
Wow.
I'll never forget that, the feeling I had, because let's put it this way, my sins were laid bare. There was nothing hidden from him.
The presence of God there, it's amazing. The deep presence of God's omnipotence, as it were, huh?
Very much. Very much. I continued to go back to the bookstore and get books and read. And when it came, so there was a friend of mine told me, says, I was supposed to have gone to St. John and talk to him about becoming Orthodox. And she's, oh, no, he's mean. Well, you know, Americans, when they think of mean, it's different than, if she'd have said strict, okay, but mean, it's like, so I pulled away.
Were you talking to Father Seraphim at this point?
I was talking to Father Seraphim, and I was so afraid to even approach Father Seraphim with this because I didn't know him that well.
Yeah. It's interesting. Your experience of just knowing you were home is what's described in the life of Father Seraphim when he walked into the cathedral. I guess now which cathedral are we talking about? The old cathedral or the new one?
No, this is the new cathedral.
Oh yeah, the new cathedral, because this is 1965?
About 65.
Yeah. So St. John reposes just about a year later?
He reposed in July of 66.
Right. Okay.
I had, before I started back, it was during Great Lent. And I had gone up to kiss the gospel, on a Saturday night service. And there was a young man had told St. John, says, I'll stop her because she'll come and get anointed. St. John looked at him, Vladika looked at him and says, no, she won't come. And he said, well, she's not Orthodox. And Vladika looked at him and said, she soon will be.
Beautiful.
The person had told me that.
So this is like these first couple times you're in the cathedral, or first time?
No, it was a few times I had been to the cathedral. And then later on, I almost So I started bleeding internally, and I had gone to the hospital, and they couldn't find what was wrong with me. And I had no more than uttered the words to our blessed Vladika, because he's been reposed. He said that if you let the doctors find out what's wrong with me and spare my life, I promise you I will go and be baptized.
Okay, so this is after St. John's Repose in 66.
Yes.
And you've been going for about a year or so, off and on. To the cathedral, to the bookstore, reading books, etc.
Absolutely. And I told the Blessed Theotokos that if she helped spare my life, I would make sure I would be baptized and become Orthodox. I no more than finished the prayer, then the doctors came in and said, this is what's wrong with you. You've got to have emergency surgery to save my life. And they did. Wow. And I went, when I got out of the hospital, I went and told Eugene about it. And he says, okay, he started preparing me. And he talked to the priest, and he came over, and Eugene gave me talked to me about Orthodoxy, gave me a quiz, make sure I understood what it was. I want to back up to a bit because I had also asked Eugene if he would be my son's godfather.
Okay.
And he said yes. I was put in a position of a Russian man, a young man, saying, I want to be your godfather. I didn't want it, but I felt like I had to say, okay, fine,
Yeah.
When it came time for my baptism, this person was nowhere around to be found. So I went to Eugene and I told him the situation. I said, will you please be my godfather? And he said, yes. And this is how he became my godfather.
Well, that was a blessing.
So
sure.
It really, ISIS, when it came time, and ISIS, the priest kept dragging his feet about, oh, call me next week, And I'd go to Vladika Jan, the supplicer at the cathedral, and I'd say, I promised God, I promised you. And to help. So one day I had laid down and took a nap, and I woke up. But I had dreamed of my son and I standing in the cathedral alone. And the royal gates opened up, the curtain came back, and the royal gates opened up, and St. John, Vladika Jan, came out of the altar, walked up to him, my son and I, blessed us, turned around, and walked back into the altar and closed the curtains and the doors. I woke up. I called Eugene, and I told Eugene, he says, you have St. John's blessings.
Wonderful.
That was in the middle of the week. On the Saturday, we were baptized.
There you go. Sign that it was coming. It was imminent. And so did they, just some minor questions, you don't have to go into detail, but just curiosity, there's a lot of people today converting to Orthodoxy, probably many more than in your day. You were probably an exception, I would guess. Is that correct?
Well, we had no English speaking priest.
That's my first question is how did you deal with that environment, the all Russian services, and how did Eugene guide you? What did he tell you?
He told me, okay, first of all, he said, put your books aside when you come to church. Because you're feeding your soul. Your soul understands the language, and that's what you're feeding.
Interesting.
I did, and I began to grasp more and more of Orthodoxy and the services.
Fascinating. There are, of course, many people who've dealt with this language barrier over the years and still do in many of the churches and monasteries. So this is really important. So his counsel was to pray how in the church? Did he tell you
you stand there and you pray, and he says, I says, when do you know when to cross yourself? When do you know? He says, you follow what the deacon is doing, or you pick out a babushka and watch what they are doing, and you do what they are doing.
Okay.
And you begin to really learn. As the time went on, your soul, as it understands, you begin to somehow, some way, you begin to understand the services without being understanding the language.
Interesting. So over the years, did you actually learn also rationally Russian, or did you never learned?
No.
We were just talking about that. So we were in San Francisco, and you'd have these Russian people come up, these Russian ladies come up to her and saying, Marina, you need to learn Russian. You should learn Russian. And her response was?
My contribution to the Russian colony is me speaking English.
That's great. I'll be the representative to the English speaking world for you.
I did ask Eugene, I says, when it comes time for confession, when I go to confession, I'm going to a priest that doesn't understand English. What do I do? And he says, remember, you're confessing before the gospel and the cross. You're not confessing to the man. He is a witness.
Yes.
So it made it so much easier to go ahead and confess.
Yes.
As you know, we had a priest there, which we do. Everybody, if you've ever been to cathedral way back when, Father John, I don't know if you ever knew him, Father John Shashnev.
No.
Well, anyway, his English was what they considered he spoke English. So his English was, after you'd hear confession and he prayed the prayer, he'd look at you and says, I hope God forgives you. So
that's you probably were expecting that you had, a little more positive statement than I hope.
But and I talked to Eugene about it, and we would laugh.
Yeah. Because
I began to understand it was just the language barrier, but the church itself is the one that has all the answers. I mean, I confessed in English. I spoke English, but the priest didn't seem to mind at all.
Were you the only, besides Gleb and besides Eugene, were you pretty much the only convert at that time, or were there other converts?
There was one other one at the time. I became Orthodox. And that was a friend of, was later on was a friend of, at the time, was Vladika's friend. I can't remember his name.
That's okay. So tell me, any other reminiscence at those times with St. John? Did you have any other things?
There wasn't that many. What the stories I've heard was always from my husband and the friends, the St. John's people, Vladikian people.
Did you? And, so your husband was.
I met my husband in church.
Okay.
In fact,
he was a Russian speaker then, obviously.
He was Russian, very Russian.
Okay.
In fact, he was a starosta. I didn't realize what a starosta was or anything as a word.
Church warden. I've learned that today as well.
Yeah, the work that went into it. But it was later on. It was in about 1970. I married him.
Okay, so he knew St. John
very well.
He was, during St. John's life, he was the church warden there at the cathedral.
He was with St. John
when they went to court.
In fact, I have the papers with that.
Wow. Okay. And how about Eugene during this time when he was just a layman and a reader, as you said, and he was at the bookstore? Any other reminiscences from this period that you want to share?
Oh, we would talk. One of the things that I would ask him questions. One of the questions I asked Eugene one day is that you'd hear the Protestants saying the gospel has to be spread through the world before the end, before the end times. And I asked Eugene about it. And Eugene looked at me and said, this was in 1966, 67, says, it's already been done. And I said, how? He says 1917, when Russia was, when the Russian people had to flee communism, says they went to all parts of the world. And the first thing they did was set up churches. So
the witness has been spread through the dispersion of all the Orthodox throughout the world. Right.
And also he always tells me, he told me, and as you know, at the time in 66, 67 on, Russia was communist. And he'd always say that at the end, look to Russia. When people start talking about it, look to Russia. And he told me what it was supposed to take place within Russia. Says Russia would fall, that there would be this period of time of the president in office, but there will be a czar, would be reinstated. So it'll be a very pious czar. He told me, he says, the people will become so discontent with the piety of the czar because he's not giving them what they want of the material things, that he will have to step down. He says, then comes the Antichrist. Then comes the fall of everything.
So Russia would fall, meaning communism would end in Russia.
Right, and that has happened.
Yes, it has. And so if there's going to be a czar, that would mean there would have to be a great revival of Orthodoxy.
Right, and that's taking place now. I mean, they're building churches.
Yes. So did Father Seraphim ever talk about that more in the sense of he thought that there would be a time when the Russian people and the Russian church would return to Orthodoxy? Because during the 60s, of course.
Oh, yeah.
They had
absolutely. Absolutely. He did.
Okay. He did.
And he says that's why ROCOR has kept the traditions they've kept, is to help set up and to be part of that.
So you think he would have been in favor of the unity again with the church?
I really do. I really do.
Yeah. And he was positive in terms of the church in Russia. He didn't think, well, it's over. They're gonna like, it's the end of the Church of Russia. They're gonna remain under the Sergianist,
no.
Delusion or whatever.
He's positive it's going to be reinstated. Would be the church will become very as it was.
You know, it's actually pretty interesting because my mother, when she would do that, and she collected all these Orthodox words, and so I've gone back and read a lot of them, and even in the point of the Orthodox word, that what they were writing about was to the certain point of Russia started to renew itself, started to change. And it actually, when we kind of thought, when I was reading it, it actually started to change during World War II when Stalin had to open up the churches. And so it's like letting the genie, it's like opening Pandora's box. There's no way you're going to get everything back in. And so that's where the start occurred during this time, during World War II. And so it was actually very, and they wrote about this and in the older Orthodox words, which was actually quite fascinating and gave me a very, very different perspective of how important all this really, really kind of happened, and how history opened up the door. How God opened the door. Yeah, he used communism, and yeah, we had to use the war, but it opened up the churches.
Sure. Well, many times God allows for very grave hardship because something good will come about, purification and then illumination. That's on a micro and a macro level. We see that again and again. So you knew Eugene, and then at some point he disappears and they go up to Platina, right?
Well, I wouldn't say disappeared.
Well, disappears. I mean, he's no longer there at the cathedral. That's what I mean. Not disappears.
This is something that they bought the property. He told me that's what their goal was, and they was looking for property and to go away and establish a monastery. And he did. I would drive up.
It was like 6 hours.
A 6-hour drive. Leave out of San Francisco on a.
Back then, you didn't have those highways, probably the big long highways they have today.
Yes, we did.
Oh,
it was when you got off. This is when you got off the highway and driving up there. That's story.
Yeah, that's a forever. Okay, yeah. So he would also come down to the cathedral, right? I mean, we read about that in the life, but you would go up as well to see him.
Yes, we did. In fact, he would go up and spend some time there in the summer with them.
Oh, this is like 69, 70?
This is the 1970s.
Okay. And so he continued to be, was he your spiritual father as well for both of you?
He was my spiritual father as well as my godfather.
Yeah.
I could sit down and talk to him about anything.
Yeah. So you would go up there occasionally on the pilgrimage they had or whatever and to see him.
I would go up to their conferences and, but I usually worked. So I would go up on a Saturday morning, leave Saturday morning early, about 2 a.m. and be there in time for church and all that they would get up. They'd be there and then head back out the afternoon to back into San Francisco.
Did you see a change in Father Seraphim over the years? In terms of his, just his spiritual life, his monastic life, and then he was a higher monk and.
Well, he was always a very pious layman that I knew as Eugene. He was very pious. The church, he helped me in so much. You know how many times that as laymen or people that we would break fast. And I would go into Father Seraphim and I say, I blew it, I broke Lent. He never got angry with me. He never scolded me at all. All he ever said, there is the next bite, the next meal. Start now.
So he wasn't a rigorist, as people like to claim, and a fanatic.
He was full of love and compassion.
Father, he didn't have a great following, when he was alive.
He didn't.
He really didn't. And when he would give talks, and everybody's like, "Oh, it must have been so wonderful to hear Father Seraphim talk." And I look at him and say, he was boring. He was flat out boring. I mean, he put you to sleep. I still listen to his homilies on tape, put me to sleep if I need to go to sleep. The other one was like very dynamic, and kind of Father Herman was very dynamic and very to kind of do that. And Father Seraphim was like, it's just like, it's just like one tone and everything. It's just,
It's true.
And he would avoid people.
Yes, he did.
He'd get finished. He'd kind of do it, and
he'd disappear.
And
the only time he was visible is when we would go up there, and he would spend time with his godson and with me.
Yeah, you were telling me, Father, the other day about your time at the Tsar's room. Why don't you tell that story, and then what he said about after the snake.
After the snake, yeah. So I'm staying there and in the Tsar's room, and so they, as a kid, I'm a kid, and they're like, and they're like, "Oh, you're gonna go stay in the Tsar's room." I mean, it's like, and it was full of books, and and it had a bed there with pillows, and it was like, "Oh, I'm in the Tsar's room." So one morning,
We should probably tell the people the Czar's room is just it's a simple, but nice.
So very simple room. There's nothing.
Very simple.
I mean, we talking. You got to talk about. They made a shack look pretty good and called the Czar's room. They kind of do that. So I get up in the morning and I need to go out because they had no indoor plumbing, so you had to go out and use the outhouse. So I got up and I was getting and I said, man, I just got to go. I got to go. So I walk out and I'm getting ready to step down. And I just happened to look down. And there's like a big old diamondback crawling over the steps. So as a kid, I said, well, I guess I don't have to go that bad. And I had, and I went back into the Czar's room and went back to bed. Then I got up and said, I have to go. And I looked, there was no snake around to kind of do that. So then Father Seraphim after church and after breakfast, he goes, have you written your mother? Sasha, have you written your mother? I said, no, I haven't yet. He goes, you need to write your mother. He goes, now you go back in that room and you write a letter to your mother. I said, okay. And then after you write that letter, we'll go down. And at that time, it was just like, the general store, the postal, the post office, all this one little thing, and and where you can go get gas. So he says, Sasha, did you write a letter to your mother? And I said, yes, I did. He goes, okay. He gave me an envelope. He goes, fold it up, put it in the envelope, and we're going to go down to the post office. We'll pick up a few things, and you can mail your letter to your mother. I said, okay. So we go down, we pick the things up, and he doesn't ask me on the way down. We're just kind of talking. Then on the way back, he said, what did you write to your mother? Sasha, what'd you tell your mother? I said, I told my mother I'm having a good time up here. I like it up here and everything else. And I told her about the story about the snake this morning. And he goes, oh, your mother, as soon as she gets that letter, she's going to be up here. And no sooner than she got that letter, she came flying up, get in the car, we going home,
He knew your mother very well.
Yeah, very well. Yeah, very well. Yeah.
So you grew up going up there a couple times over the 70s, or you grew up? Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, right before I used to go up there, and right before I was getting ready to raise my hand to go in the Navy, my mother made me go up there and to go up there and get a blessing from my godfather. And of course, being the young man, I said, this is my life. I want to do what I do. She's like, no, you need to go up there and get a blessing from your godfather. I said, okay. And I went up there, we sat and we talked. And I asked myself for a blessing, to join the Navy. And he goes, I give you a blessing. He goes, but you'll only be in there as long as God wants you in there. Remember that, Sasha. Remember that. And I said, okay. And I wanted to make a Navy a career. I wanted to stay in for 20 years. After 10 years, because of some of the issues that I had, kind of to do that, it was like, no, you have to go. And I said, okay, so my time is done. And those words always come back. You'll only be there as long as God wants you to be. Mm-hmm. And that was it. It was 10 years. It was done. It was over with and done.
Did he ever talk to you about the priesthood?
Never. But I always wanted to be one. That was like one of the things. It was when I grew up and without even thinking about it, just Father Seraphim, to kind of do that, and I would talk to him, and just being around like Archbishop Anthony of San Francisco, Vladika Nectari, and all these other priests that I would, Chesparis, who was at that time carrying the Kushrut icon, being around Father John Shashnev, all these wonderful people, and being around Father Seraphim, it's like, this is what I want to be. Mm-hmm. This is when the time is right. And I put it out of my mind, of course. I put it totally out of my mind. But the time came, it was like, that's another story. Mm-hmm. God tapped me on the shoulder, as my mother and my mashka would say. But God tapped me on the shoulder, and tapping me on the shoulder meant dislocating my shoulder and being out of work for a while, and surgeries, and kind of do all that. I got it. I got my attention. God got my attention. So this is what you need to do. So, but seeing his love for the church.
Yeah. Do you draw? I was going to say, do you draw on your remembrance of Father Seraphim for now as a priest?
All the time. All the time. And all these ones that were around, if they would say, what is your best memory of them? My best memory of all of them is love. Love. Absolute love. Love for the church, love for God, and their love for people. Understanding, compassionate, and love. And it's just,
how did Father Seraphim express love in your experiences, your memories? What would be the most characteristic expression of love from him? Just generally his sacrifice and love for God, or how would you describe it?
Simple way, non-judgmental. He wasn't judgmental. He wasn't condemning people. He wasn't kind of to do that. He'll tell you if something's wrong, you're going to get corrected. But being, the biggest thing was, he not judgmental. I mean, if you're telling mom, there's always the next meal, don't worry about it. There's always the next bite. Don't worry about it. You're not going to hell today. Maybe later, but you're not today.
What do people get wrong about Father Seraphim? Because what you just told me is very interesting, because Father Seraphim is known from his writings mostly today, or maybe some of his homilies. And in his writings, he's known, especially in his criticisms of certain strains of Orthodoxy that are modernist, or whatever you want to call it. Of course, during his day, there was the autocephaly of the Orthodox Church in America, which was very controversial in his day, and he was opposed to that and other things. So what comes down to ecumenism and surgeonism, all these things, that's where people tend almost always to focus on is his writings, and they come across as very strident. You just said the man never was judgmental.
Never judgmental.
He was quiet, and he didn't want attention, and he fled people's attention. And so you're presenting something that maybe in some people's minds don't go together. How can you be those two things together? Maybe. So what do they get wrong about Father Seraphim, in your opinion, today?
What do they get wrong about Father Seraphim?
Or what's the most thing that people just don't pay attention to about him? Like one of the things you just mentioned, I think that he's I would think that for me, it was that. And so I really kind of there was a time, and I don't really like to talk about it, but I'm going to say it.
Go ahead.
Okay. And the issue was what it was with the old calendar Greek. So, to do that. And started coming in with Panteleimon, the Pantelimonites, as they used to say, and everything else like that. And I kind of dealt with that firsthand to do that. And it's like everybody had these problems with Father Seraphim when he was alive. They talked bad about him, talked ill about him. And when the man was dying and he died, and then turned around and said, "Oh, he's a saint, he's a saint." And I said, where were you? You just condemned the man, before he got sick, and now you hear he's a saint, he's a saint, he's a saint. And so it really bothered me. And of course, and when I saw it, then I went back and then kind of it wasn't that he was really condemning anybody. It was, I think we take things very, very wrong. And we take it in this way. It's just a warning. Everything is just a warning. This is the problem. It's no different than when somebody goes to confession and a priest tells this person, this is the problem. And we don't want to hear that problem. We're judgmental about the problem, now, to kind of do, and almost to the certain point that Father Seraphim was a legalist. He wasn't. If you want to put it in the form that in their conceptual mind, he wasn't. It was tried to do.
Did he talk about the royal path? Do you remember him talking about the need to be on the royal path? Is that kind of where you would, far from legalism?
It was never kind of used. It was only later that he would say the royal path, but then earlier is, but you got to be on that path, that right down the middle path. You know, it was don't go left, don't go right, don't go far right, don't go far left, just be down the middle. That's the church, down the middle. That's the path. We don't have to be one way or the other. Just follow the path that all the saints have gone down. Simple.
So you Father, were you and your mother at the end of his life, at his repose and his funeral?
Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that, or what?
You want to talk about
it? What do you remember?
I my issue was Mom won't talk about it because I left the funeral very upset because he was a monastic. I thought he should have been respected as a monastic. But you had people coming up and kind of doing them, pulling the air from his face. And they would go and put the air back, and people would come and pull it off again. You know, and Archbishop Anthony of Lodicanactati that were there. And finally, they just let it be. It was very disrespectful. Yeah. And
they were doing that for what reason exactly?
Well, because he's a saint.
They wanted to see his face. They wanted to see his face. They thought the pictures that we have are extremely serene and peaceful in his face. They wanted to gaze on that, I guess.
Yeah. But my point is, out of everything, here I was in the Navy. I'm like 20 years old. Yeah, about 20 years old, I think. Yeah, about 20. And he's a monastic.
Yeah.
And my whole thing about it is, it's like, you don't know Father Seraphim, you know, because if you were a follower and understanding of Father Seraphim, he was a monastic.
He would have never done that.
He would have never done it. And then, you know, he would have lectured you about that later. You should have never done that. Reggie, you know, and in a monotone, get, you know, in this whole monotone thing, he would never raise his voice, never lower. It's like one thing, so you get it chewing out in a monotone, you know. That's what it would be. And you're like, man, did I get just chewed out or what? You know?
It was like when he was I'm going to say this, when he was laying there in the hospital bed, to see these women that they wanted to become nuns, holding on to his hand and kissing his hands and rubbing his arms and stuff. It was not the respect that he deserved as a monastic.
So he was very strict in his monastic life.
Very much so. You know, when he was in the hospital, and I was overseas at the time, I was in Japan, and my mother called me and she told me, your godfather's in the hospital, and I don't know how much longer he's going to have. And normally they don't give you leave unless it's a relative. So Mom got on the phone, she talked with Master Chief. And next thing you know, Master Chief said, he calls me into his office. I was like, Master Chief, what did I do wrong? I didn't do anything wrong today. And he goes, and he's like, no. He goes, you know, hey, Alex, hey, Logunov, you have to go home. And to kind of do that, then we have you on a flight, you know, to go home to kind of do that. And one of the things that was very, very important for me, and this was very selfishly, I was asking God and the Mother of God for me to be there in time, because I had to ask for his forgiveness and to kind of do the kind of what I heard for you from today when you were talking about Peter, and when, you know, Peter's point of what's Peter, you know, that repentance part to kind of to do that. And when I got there, they're all around. I couldn't get in to see him. And to kind of, it was just very, very difficult. And then Father Herman asked me to drive him around. I drove Father Herman around, and he goes, drop me off here. And he goes, come and pick me up in a couple hours. And I said, okay. And so I dropped him off, and I went back to the hospital. And I'm going to say, the glory be to God, nobody else was in there, you know, except for my mother, and nobody else was there. And I asked the nurse if I can go back there and see him. And she said yes. And so he's laying there, and to do that. And I walk up to him and ask for his forgiveness for all the things that I've said, for all the things that I thought, and all the things that I believed about him. And he was laying in bed. He was trying to raise his hand. He had everything in there. He couldn't speak. He was trying to raise his hand, and you could tell in his eyes it was to give a blessing and to kind of do that. No sooner that was done, I walked out, and I just about got in my car, and he died. Yeah, he died. And then I had to deal with all this.
So there were things even then that there were slanders against Father Seraphim.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And within the community of the Russian church there in San Francisco, or where were you?
No, it was. I hate to say this, man, but it was mostly American.
It was.
It was mostly Americans, man. Americans love to gossip, man. You know, let's kind of do that. Be judgmental, you know. Just saying.
Well, thank God you had that opportunity. God gave you that blessing to come back.
Absolutely.
Well, you know, one thing I was very grateful for before he got really, really bad is that he gave me another spiritual father. And I have remained with this clergy for all these years since. He's been there, and I was, but he looked out after my spiritual well-being, as he knew he was going to be leaving this earth.
Is this already when he was in the hospital that he told you this, or before?
No, this was before he had gotten down sick. And I asked him why. And he says, this is who you're going to go with and who you're going to be with now spiritually. To be your spiritual father.
Do you think he knew that his end was coming?
I absolutely he knew. Absolutely. He would not have done that if he did not know. And the person, well, he still is. I don't know if I should say it.
Yeah, you can.
My spiritual father, who he gave me over to, is Archbishop Kirill of San Francisco.
Okay, so already at that time,
he was just a priest at the time, but it's still, this is where Father Seraphim was looking ahead for my well-being, my spiritual well-being.
That's really shows a lot about his pastoral heart, about caring for you. And also about his sense of imminent departure, which is really.
And I didn't understand until he went of why. It was a couple of 3 months before he had got sick.
Do you remember him saying what we all kind of commemorate now because of the writings? It's later than you think. Did he talk about the?
Oh, absolutely. He was constantly telling me that.
Yeah, she
still say it.
Well, they know that you still say it. And then the other one, that when mom goes to church, you know, he gets her prosphora. She comes home and she breaks it up and she dries it out. Mom's got prosphora all over the house. You know,
I got jars. Well, okay. Sometimes when Eugene and I would go up into the loft and we'd have a cup of tea and talk, you know, when at the bookstore. And one day I was looking and there was big jars of prosphora that him and Gleb have. And I said, why do you have all these dried prosphora? He says, because one day that's all we're going to have to eat. So I saving my prosphora too. I said, because one day that's all we're going to have to eat.
Yes, well, sometimes in our day we hear rumors of wars and rumors of starvation coming and rumors of economic implosion.
And I got Also, the Arthos, he told me to, I don't eat my Arthos when we receive it, on St. Thomas Sunday. I bring the Arthos home, dry it, and put it in a jar because that's the only medicine we are going to have. A time will come. That's what he told me. So I have the Arthos, the medicine for us when
she's been saving it for 60 years, so you know where that goes. Everybody's drying their food and everything. I have holy water and prospheta. What more is there? You're
gonna be living off that, like in the lives of the ascetics. We read that they lived off the.
But how many times do we eat our prospheta or antidron and it's very satisfying? How is that?
Yeah,
just something so simple is so satisfying.
So did Father Seraphim ever talk to you about the Russian Church abroad with regard to the other jurisdictions and the various problems? And did you ever talk to him about, well, where can we go to?
You got to talk to this one right here, because she tells everybody, and she says, "And Father Seraphim never lifted it, so I'm not going." And so she's passing that down to me, and I made a mistake and went a couple times with my mashka, and I'm never doing that again. But anyway, you can tell the story.
Okay.
Father Seraphim forbid me to ever go to the OCA.
Really? This was as Eugene or as Father Seraphim? He told you this?
Both.
Okay. And why did he say that? Why did he say not to go?
Because of what had taken place with the OCA and the church on Green Street.
You mean in San Francisco, Green Street, meaning the cathedral, the OCA cathedral? Okay. You're talking about the autocephaly with the Moscow Patriarchate or something else?
It's how they turned around and they stole the church from Rokor. It was supposed to have been Rokor's.
Oh, I see. I don't know this.
Father Seraphim, and I will not.
Never have.
He didn't lift it before he died.
So he told you expressly, somehow the conversation came up and he said, you do not have a blessing to go
right.
to
He
the
told
OCA.
me, that's it. Oh, you can't go. I said,
so you're being obedient to your spiritual father. But I'm just trying to understand, it was a local thing or it had to do with the autocephaly? Because I know he also wrote things that he was very disappointed along with the church abroad.
He just laid the law down to me and that was it.
Okay.
I wasn't up to me as his goddaughter.
Sure.
Or his spiritual daughter to turn around and question him.
Sure. No, I understand the position you're in, but I'm just trying to understand his reasoning. But so he didn't explain in detail, but that was his.
I didn't ask. I just did what he asked me to do.
And I'm going to say this. This is, if of the things that he wrote, or the things that are coming about and all these things that he wrote, I think we can kind of see his wisdom and all that is don't go, because of things that are occurring around other jurisdictions of Orthodoxy and the direction that it's taking.
Did he ever speak to you about other jurisdictions in terms of communion?
I didn't really ask. I really didn't ask. A part of Rokor, I go to Russian church. I'm part of Rokor. I've always been Rokor. There's nothing that attracted me. It's like it's just nothing attractive. I kind of
it's curious. It's interesting because earlier in the conversation we talked about his belief that the Russian church would return and there would be. You think he would be in favorable toward the unity with the church in Russia. So I'm just trying to discern
I do believe he would be for the unity.
Well, he talked about it.
Yeah,
it was nothing that it was. He wrote about it and he talked about it. If you can go back and look in some of the other part of Orthodox words, to kind of do that, he hinted to that, and he spoke about it. About unity of because it was always the thing that he did say, the roll course just waiting to go back. Yeah, that's all it's waiting for. It's never, and so the whole point was never separated. We even want to kind of do it as a family disagreement, and now the family disagreement's been done. So he's always been that point, but the OCA easily, they're
a little different. He made a distinction between the OCA, autocephaly, these other issues that were coming up.
Right.
And there's a long history there. I don't think most of our listeners probably have any idea, but there's a long history there going back to the 40s. And
it's an awful part of history. It really is.
So he had all that in his mind, but then that's different than what we're talking about the Church of Russia. And yet, one of my favorite books of all time is the Russian Catacomb Saints that he labored over in the 70s to produce, finally published after his repose. And of course, he loved the new martyrs, right? So much.
Oh, yes.
And so he clearly didn't, that's what's fascinating. He didn't see it as, he didn't, on the one hand, he's seeing the new martyrs, praising the new martyrs and their stance with regard to surgeonism, but he's still saying there'll come a time when the church in Russia will be regenerated and come back. So I think some people today, they have difficulty making those distinctions, and embracing those two realities at the same time. They want to either act like that, there was never a problem with surgeonism, and therefore they don't really listen to the new martyrs, or they want to act like nothing's ever changed, and we have to stay back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Right.
But he seemed to see that both. It's both. Not a betrayal of the new martyrs to have unity with the Church of Russia, and the Church of Russia will eventually get beyond the slavery to communism, which is it's fascinating. So you heard him talk a lot about the new martyrs, and the Church in Russia must have.
He loved that was.
And he also, him and Gleb, they would receive letters from Russia, from the Soviet Union. Of course, it was underground. They would get it, because they couldn't, as you would know in their writings in the Orthodox word. And
how about the relationship of Gleb and Eugene, or Father Seraphim and Father Herman? Can you talk a little bit about that? You mentioned a little bit earlier that Father Herman was the very charismatic one and would keep your attention during his talks. And Father Seraphim was boring. Well, his character was not charismatic. But he was deep.
But they worked together so well.
Yeah, they did.
They really did.
They did, yeah.
That speaks a lot to their discernment, because, some people want to be around people who are like them, but they were comfortable not being like the other person, and they're
complete opposite, polar opposites, to kind of to do that, So it's, Father Seraphim couldn't wait to get away from people. Father Herman couldn't wait to be around people. Yes.
I had the blessing to in 1994 for about an hour to meet Father Herman. I was in Forestville for a couple hours, and I was for a talk, and he was very charismatic, like you said. He kept you glued to your seat with stories.
Oh yeah, he really was. But the only thing I will say this about Father Herman is, when I would go up to Platina, he always, you go ahead and go be with your godfather, and he would just take a back seat to everything.
Yeah,
and he let us talk. He let us visit. And
he'd take me into the kitchen to go cook. Father Herman, he go, church is almost done. Come on, Sasha, let's go. You're going to go make breakfast for everybody. I said, what? You pull out the stuff and say, no, make something. I said, Father, I don't know what to do. Let's make something. It'll be good. Don't worry about it. And I said, just make something. It'll be good.
You'd have to know him.
That's amazing. Yeah, that sounds like that makes sense for me with the little I know of Father Herman. So did they ever disagree or publicly appear as having troubles? what you recall?
You know what?
If there was, it was kept quiet.
Very quiet.
Yeah.
So they were really united. That's the impression everybody had. They were.
I think it's that united front, that they had.
Mm-hmm. How about were there other monastics? How many other monastics were there toward the end of Father Seraphim's life, and how did they fit?
No,
What you remember?
There wasn't that many. There was some young people would come in for a short while and leave, visit and stay maybe for the summer.
It was pretty harsh living, so you had to be a serious.
It was real harsh. It was hard to kind of to do that, and then it's like, you gotta. There's just like there was so much craziness, with people that were. It was just so much. I'm going to give you a perfect example, so. And I'm just asking, what's this all about? And they just, Father Seraphim just said, don't worry about it, Sasha. And it's okay. And so here's this woman. She wants to be a nun, but she got a kid. So she brings the kid up there. She leaves her kid at the monastery. She runs off, and now she's going around pretending to be a nun and traveling all over California, Oregon, and Washington. Left her husband. I mean, just absolute craziness. It's just absolute craziness. Here you go. Here's a kid. And I'm like, just total point of it, it's like, what is this? And he just, they talked to her and kind of do this. She just wouldn't even listen, and she's going to go on her way. And the real, I just shake my head. And
she was American. She was American.
Yeah. That's where I'll tell you, one of the things they'd come in, especially during the hippie time.
Oh yeah.
They come into the cathedral, and they would refer to. We're speaking of Gleb and Eugene.
Yeah.
Would refer to them as incense sniffers. Because they would come in, these hippies, and start going, oh.
Well, it's the same thing, Father. It's the same thing that in here at the church during Great Lent, and then you have all these people during Great Lent coming to church, wanting to sing and kind of do all that, and then the people that are there doing the grind, because. Orthodoxy it's a grind. It's just a flat out grind. There's nothing beautiful about it. It's just a grind. You got to get up, go do it, kind of to do that. The benefit, all this other stuff, but it's just, you just get dirty and, upset. All these people come to church, and it's the same as you have the incense snippers. And then I said, all those people, and she said, fathers, they're driving me crazy. And I said, don't worry about it, because after Pascha, all the holy people will be gone. So
So they had their share of
every day.
Yeah.
You fight these battles every day. One of the things that Father Seraphim had told me several times, that as we are entering at the end of time, with the Antichrist to come, he had said back then, the only way anyone can save their souls will be through becoming a martyr. He says that's how bad it's going to be.
There's another thing that and Mom, I'm going to help you to do this.
Okay.
I'm just going to jog your memory for a moment.
Okay.
Father Seraphim, Eugene said, you've got to put your American mind off. Oh, this is so important.
Oh, yes. When I went in to learn Orthodoxy, to start to study, he told me I had to set my American mindset aside.
Interesting. We're dealing with, and I'm sure that was the case back then, but even more so today, what some people call Ameridoxy. And that is an Orthodox version American version of Orthodoxy, which is kind of almost a new creation out of which is, I think the implication is it's a distortion.
Yeah.
And so he was telling you the American mindset, which I guess is more or less a Protestant mindset, right? I mean,
Yes.
that's the heart of it, right? That America was kind of a
Right.
so you're saying that's incompatible with a true Christian ascetic outlook.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I says, the further I've gone into Orthodoxy, the more I see what he was talking about. I had to, my mindset is not American anymore.
Yeah. So could you tell us one or two examples of that switch? What do you remember having to stop thinking and start thinking differently?
I would go and ask him. I would read something or something come across my mind, something, and somebody say something, and I'd say, is this Orthodox or is this Americanism? I need to know. So as I began to watch what was taking place, I began to be able to figure out what is the Orthodox. I have to do is really look at the Orthodox traditions, the teachings of the Orthodox faith.
So on like day-to-day things, like the way we think about certain things, the way, I mean, I would assume maybe fasting would be probably a big one, right? Or maybe how we approach.
I'll tell you, fasting was one that was very difficult to learn how to fast, to learn how to cook. As time went on, he had asked as a child, as Orthodox, Mama, I want some pancakes. Well, here it is, Lent. I told him, give me a while. Let me think about it. I came up with a recipe, a Lenten recipe for pancakes.
Yeah. You didn't have all the books. There's tons of books today, but back then
they had to come out of my head.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. I came up with muffin recipes, Lenten, cakes. I had no problem with pies because my mother taught me how to make good Southern pies, so I had no problem with that. But it's a matter of trying to figure out. When I first became Orthodox, we didn't have all of this fake meat, fake milk, fake everything. You know,
right?
You didn't have vegans in the church, you know.
So you were kind of a pathfinder on your own in many things. You had to be.
I had to be. I really had to be. Now I want to share with the especially the wives that's starting out. They're in Orthodoxy, to help them here. Take some of my recipes. I've learned through the years.
And they're good pancakes. I'm going to tell you, man, I love them. But as she said, don't do it during the first week of Lent. By the third week, they're actually pretty good. So
yeah, your taste buds have changed sufficiently to embrace. So the other thing that we recognize in the kind of what we call American mentality, which it's hard to nail down one American mentality because it's kind of we live in such a multicultural Babylonian kind of existence. But so I think maybe Protestant American is probably what was the dominating mentality back in the day. But one of the things you recognize is this idea that maybe people call it cafeteria Christianity, kind of like, ultimately we're going to conform the views of Orthodoxy on difficult issues to the norms of America, justifying the need to Americanize things because, we can't handle what these hard sayings are from the saints.
I've never been one to do that. No.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem today, is that people think that that's acceptable, that we have somehow justified to apply and therefore change basic things. For instance, one of the things that we're facing, I mean, I bet back then the whole feminist approach, which is huge today. We have people talking about women's ordination, or we have people talking about no need to wear a head covering in church, or whatever it is. The various aspects of the change of culture. There are people today who will say, "Oh, that's nonsense." I mean, women wore hair covering 50 years ago. There's no need for that anymore. Is that what you mean by put your American mentality aside and embrace Orthodoxy?
You know,
Yeah.
one of the things that I have said, this was at one of the conferences that Eugene, that Father Seraphim and Father Herman had up at Platina. And so there was some converts, women, saying, why can't women be deacons? Why can't they be priests? We need these part jobs just like that. And I spoke up and said, you know, we women in the church have the most important job that there is. We are teaching the future priests, bishops, monks, nuns. We are teaching them how to cross themselves, how to venerate, how to pray, how to fast. I wouldn't change anything from my position as a mother in the Orthodox Church.
Yeah. You just reminded me of my mother, who said almost those exact same words all the years ago, saying that the mother has the most power in all of society. She's shaping the children, the future of the society, and they abandon that for a fleeting power of whatever the careers or whatever it might be, which are, you know, don't nearly impact the society as a mother does.
Well, you know, just as well as I do, a woman should get on her hands and knees and thank God that God had the wisdom. You don't want to be a priest, because I'll be honest, it's like, you know, it is a hard job. It is a grind, you know, just to do this. The services are the easy part. People are the hard part.
Well, and for that, for someone to come to the position where they want to take the position of the priest, that means they really don't have a high estimation the position of the presbytera, or the matushka, right? That means there's a distortion already in the mindset when they don't value the position of the matushka or the mother or the role of the woman. That's the tragedy. So, but I'm just trying to get my head around when he said, put away your American mindset, you know, because he there's aspects of his life. He was very American. He had the virtues of an American in some aspects. So he doesn't mean everything. He means put something in, you know, certain.
But I think I'm just going to say that, but I think that coming into the church, into Orthodoxy, and your thing is that point that you have what Orthodox ethos, right? That's what you have.
Yeah.
So the whole point is that we have to acquire that.
Yes.
That's the culture. Ultimately, at the end, that's the culture that we need to do. The Orthodox culture, not American culture, Russian culture, Greek culture, but the Orthodox culture. And that's the whole point that everybody kind of misses.
Yes.
That's what Father Seraphim was talking about, the Orthodox ethos, that culture that we need to work and to acquire.
So that doesn't happen unless you do what he also said, you know, crucify your intellect, crucify your mind.
That's right.
And submit yourself to be transformed by the Orthodox phronema, the Orthodox outlook. You can't acquire the Orthodox ethos if you don't, like he said to you, Marina, put that aside and crucify it and accept Christ's the Orthodox understanding. It's so important. I find that's the hardest part for all there's so many converts coming in now. I remember when I was going around talking about St. Paisios about 15 years ago, and I was going to these various parishes, and I ran into people, very zealous young men, and I was talking to them, and it was amazing because they had so much zeal. They're reading all these books, and yet it felt like I was talking to a Protestant, even though they had become Orthodox and they were talking Orthodox theology, because the ethos still was the old American Protestant kind of way, like with regard to simple things, like how you talk to a priest, do you ask for his blessing? Do you all of that thing? They don't have examples though. You had Father Seraphim, Father Herman, all these great priests, bishops. You had examples that they just taught you without even opening their mouth.
Yeah.
How to walk, how to relate to clergy. So many converts today, they don't have good examples of that ethos that you're talking about.
Well, I think the first book I give to you, it's just like, well, what book do you recommend to me? I said, you need to read Father Seraphim's book on nihilism, because that's straight to the point on who you are. Now you need to put that, that's your first, I want to read The Soul After Death. Have you read Nihilism? No, read it. Before you go anywhere, read Nihilism. And if you ain't got it the first time, read it again. because that's an identifying book to who we are, especially as Americans. But anyway,
I think he says in there, you've got to, the American, the Western mentality. I think he says in there, if I'm not mistaken, in the introduction, maybe you've got to first of all admit that you are breathing in the pestilence of the age,
right?
Otherwise, you are already overcome by it. So that's interesting. You gotta look into the darkness and say, this is where I'm emerging from. This is what this is in the West. That's fascinating. Well, Father Seraphim not only told you put it aside, but he was an example of that.
Exactly. And one of the things I come to my mind, and this is very personal, that Father Seraphim, we would talk about somebody that is dying and what they could see, what's going on. And he had told me what to do if I had ever ran across that. And when my father was dying, I had gone down to see him, and they were not Orthodox at all. They were, for a long time, totally against me ever becoming Orthodox. And Father Seraphim, I said, he says, instead of trying to convert them, just pray that they can accept what you have become. And they did before they had left this earth. They had. So my dad would look at the windows and start yelling at the windows to get out of here, get out of here. So the nurses, he's hallucinating. And I looked at her and I said, what? So she repeated it and she told me what was going on, and I heard him do it. I says, I'll fix that. So I did what Father Seraphim said. I didn't have holy water, but I went through every window and door in that place and made the sign of the cross and told the demons to depart. My dad went and got into his bed and went off.
This was toward the end of his life, and he was
at
sick.
The end of his life. My dad, because he died within about 24 hours after that. Because God granted me that I was there at his departing, and I knew what to do because Father Seraphim had told me what to do, what to read for non-Orthodox, to help them to cross over.
How about that? So your father, how old were you when he reposed? That a long time ago?
I was about 55, I think.
So you'd been Orthodox for quite some time at that.
I've been Orthodox 58 years, going on 59.
At the time of his repose, he was exposed.
They were exposed to it, but they got where that they didn't try to convert me to Protestantism.
They were exposed to it enough when I got married. They had to ask my mother, "Are you sure they got married?"
But they did attend the wedding.
They did come to the wedding. Yeah.
They were Baptist. They probably thought
my mother was Baptist and my father was Pentecostal. Does that tell you something?
Yeah. So Father Seraphim, in terms of his relationship to other clergy that like St. John or Bishop Nectari or
Bishop
others.
Nectari would go there on his way up to Seattle, and he'd go by.
He was like over the monastery anyway.
Yeah.
And Nectari was from he was from Ultima, and to do that.
So they were close with Father Seraphim.
Yes.
Yeah. And Vladikian was Father Seraphim's, if you want to do Eugene, that was his spiritual father. Yeah.
So Father Seraphim was extremely dedicated to them, but also to the church abroad.
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, he was.
Yeah.
He loved to, it was very much the traditions of the church abroad. That was to to do that, and that faithfulness and everything else. And it's very hard, even for myself to a certain point, and my mother and my matchka and everything. There's a certain point, even my deacon and his matchka, we're trying to pass things along, but it's very hard that people just don't. What difference does it make? They don't. understand that, for the culture and the tradition to preserve the Russian Church abroad for what it's done and
you're
how
in
it's
North
preserved.
Carolina. You're in North
I
Carolina,
am,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. So you have a lot of you have some Southerners who are converting, and you're trying to impart to them. You do English services or mostly?
I just started. Yeah, I just started doing English services to do that. I do it early in the morning. I do it at 7:30 in the morning. Try to be finished by 9. To kind of do that.
So you're talking about passing on the ethos and the phronema of the church abroad.
Right.
You talking about with the Americans or just anybody, including Russians today?
I try with the Russians. They kind of to do that, and I think in a certain way, I think Americans are more open to it than the Russians are.
Interesting. That's fascinating.
It's a very Russia. When I went for reconciliation, they appreciate they love the church abroad. They kind of do it in Russia. They really do. Here in America, I don't really think they appreciate the church abroad as much, to be honest.
So is that because they've been infected by the American mentality, you think, or what is it that's their challenge?
Yeah, I guess two humanist societies, meshing together. Yeah, I guess that's the creation that we see. From communism frame of thought, American frame of thought, and look what you get.
Are these some of the? You mentioned something when we were talking about the super correct mentality that you're facing. That Father Seraphim talked to. Father Seraphim talked about that a lot, and you mentioned that earlier a little bit. But is that part of the problem that you're facing? This legalism.
I think we've kind of. I think it's kind of one of those things. Is I see it because I saw it. I saw it in the 70s. I saw it in the 70s. The issue, in the 60s as a kid, as a child. And then, of course, when in my 20s, in my 18, 19, I see it, and I see the same mentality. And it's something. Is it then I ask myself a question: Is it just a cycle? Is it just a cycle that that society goes through? Do Orthodox go through this ultra correctness, and you need to do this, and you need to do this, and you need to do this, and you need to do it all. And it's like, well, that's nice, and I'll give you a perfect example, it's like, well, you need to do an Ecofist. You need to do an Ecofist, all during Great Lent. Every day you need to do pick a psalm out of the Psalter, pick a Katizma out of the Psalter. And you need to do that during Great Lent. You need to do that. This is what you have to do. And I stand there, and it's like you're telling people to do it. So somebody asked me, they said, Father, what do you want me to do? Come to church. I don't need you to make it just, I got to stay home and do my Ecofist. You're not going to come to Vigil? You're not going to come to Vespers? You're not going to go to confession the night before? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I got to stay home and do my Ecofist. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's a kind of willfulness. And not, and that's behind a lot of the super correct mentality.
Yeah.
So Father Seraphim has been so impactful for so many people around the world, and many people consider him a saint. What do you think? Do you think that he was a saint, and do you think that he will be glorified, and do you think he should be glorified in the immediate future?
You want to take that?
You start.
Okay. When the time is right, it will happen. I'm going to tell you a story, and a lot of people are going to get upset with me, but I'm to a certain point that I really don't care. I was at a church one time, and after pre-sanctified liturgy, somebody comes into the altar and said, Father, can you bless these icons? The person wants their icons blessed. And I said, sure. I'm going out there, pulled out the book, open it up to read the prayer with the for the holy water. And then I look down, I'm getting ready to bless. I bless one icon. I turn around and I'm get ready to lift. And I turned around and looked, and it was an icon of Father Seraphim. I looked at him and said, I'm not going to do it. I told him I won't bless the icon. Person got upset with me. And I told him the reason why. So he kind of got on, and here's this man, he got in my face, and to kind of do that. And he says, and who are you to tell me what Father Seraphim is? I said, well, I was only his godson. That's all I am. I'm just his godson, and his belief was toward canonizations and everything else of sainthood. The church decides. The church said 50 years. This is what he believed. This is what to do. St. John was an exception to the rule. But that's his belief. So yeah, I have. Do I believe?
I understand you. So I understand you, Father. I want to make sure I understand you. So Father Seraphim said that the norm and what we should expect is 50 years after the repose, and before that, people should not rush.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So I abide by that, what I was heard. Now, if it's 47 years or 46 years or anything to do that, do I believe he's a saint? Absolutely. To do that. There's no ands, if, or buts about it. But that's not my decision. That's decision within the church.
Sure. So you're not saying people can't have veneration of him and consider him a saint. They shouldn't, but the rushing to make it official.
Right.
There shouldn't be a rush to make it official. Yeah. No. That's interesting you tell me, because I've heard the same thing from my, spiritual father and others on Mount Ethos, that this whole tendency to rush glorifications today is not very traditional. Now, some people defend it because, well, we have modern technology and everything's learned about quickly and blah, blah, blah. But I think the wisdom, and that's fine. I mean, like you said, St. John was an exception. Okay. But I think the wisdom behind that, and I think this is what Father Seraphim was getting at, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that the generation that knew him needs to kind of repose. And so therefore it's not a bias, but the whole church needs to embrace it over time.
Right.
And God has to show forth his approval over time. And time is a wonderful teacher.
Right.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's the way Father Seraphim explained it to me.
Okay. Yeah, that's fantastic. You know what? Let me ask you this one last thing before maybe you can add whatever you like. If you have more to add, let me know. But one last question or comment, and then question is, and there's so much we could talk about. We could probably do a whole other session together. Is that when I was in Greece and I had the blessing to write the introduction to his life in the Greek language, I likened Father Seraphim to the following. I don't know if I picked this up somewhere. I can't remember now where I got this from. I just thought it up myself. And that was that I said to the Greek people who were going to read his life, he's very popular in Greece, by the way. He's 3-volume, translated by a monk on New Skid on Athos, and beautiful work they did. But in any case, I said in the introduction that Father Seraphim stood on the shoulders, as it were, of these giants of spiritual life like St. John and other Russian emigres and the new martyrs and all these great saints. He had this, first of all, he was extremely gifted with languages, but he had the ability to go deep, quickly, to go deep into the mind and the way of these saints. He stood, as it were, on their shoulders, and he had by doing that and submitting to that and being obedient to that and being following closely the fathers of his day, he was able to see far into the future and to help us even today with amazing insights that he had, even about communism, about ecumenism, about all these things that we're facing, the spirit of this world. And so one of the keys to understand his, but even every saint's, gifts and insights is this faithful submission to the fathers and the tradition that came right before him. In other words, he followed not the holy fathers of the 18th century. He followed the fathers that he had in front of him that were passing on the faith to him. Would you say that that's accurate from your experience? Is that right, Father Seraphim?
I'm sitting here shaking my head. Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I said, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. He was, I still draw on things that he told me so many years ago. And I will say this, and my son can tell you, there's something that happened in this world. And it triggers something that he had told me, and I come and tell him exactly that Father Seraphim had said this was going to happen. And and I see the things happening now.
So there's times you just like, oh, look at that. We never talked about this. And your memory is jogged, and you remember having discussions about it with Father Seraphim.
Exactly.
I need to get some water. Can you get him some water?
That's amazing. Yeah.
Oh, there was some right there.
Somewhere. Oh, excuse me, Father.
No worries. Take care of yourself.
Well, you had mine right there.
But the other one is that I wanted to. There you go. Oh, well, some lemon juice. But also, like, Nectari. And well, thank you. They're one of the things that they kept the tradition up in Platina was the tradition of the Ultima Elders, and kind of because that came from Vladika Nectari, and since he was over, and they followed that monastic practice and traditions of the Ultima Elders in Platina when be with Father Seraphim and Father Herman. So you can kind of see that the Russian Church, the spirit of the Church, of the tradition of the Russian Church, was alive and well, in Platina with them, and carrying it all the way back to the Ultima Elders. So it's actually very interesting. So
thank God. Yeah. So important today to be in that river of holy tradition, right? To be obedient to those who've gone before us. Well, thanks be to God. What a blessing. Well, if there's anything you want to add at the end, anything you want to add, if
some more.
Any closing remarks or thoughts? If you want to summarize, what should we who didn't know Father Seraphim, what should we look to? What's the most important message he had, either through his example or through his words? Well, how would you summarize that?
I would say that one of the best examples of that he showed you what orthodoxy is, how to live the Orthodox faith. To fast, to confession, communion, Holy Communion, with those, and to attend as many services as you can, because people don't realize that as you get older, your body becomes frail and it's harder and harder to get around and to do. I hear people at times say, they complain about fasting. And I'll tell you, and I told my son this, the hardest fast I ever had to keep was one great Lent that my husband was very sick and dying. I would cook Lenten meal for myself, and I'd cook him what he could have, what he's supposed to eat, meat, stuff. I would sit down at the table, and he would have my plate, eating it, the Lenten food, and leave me with the non-Lenten. So I called our spiritual father, talked to him, and he says, I forbid you to fast. You eat the same as what he is eating. Father, I'm going to tell you, that was the hardest Lent I ever kept in my life. People think that if I can eat meat, it'll be so much nice. If I can have all the dairy products and it's Lent, it's not.
Mm. Right. And maybe it was also, I don't know, let me ask you this. Do you think it might have been hard also because essentially you were doing an obedience, which kind of, you had to crucify your mind on it and just kind of not, and you had to go along with this obedience, which was externally kind of backwards, or like people would think, well, this is, and the demons wanted you to be disobedient and then have thoughts of like, well, I should be fasting. And, so it was a challenge on that level. Is that accurate?
Very possible, because I'll tell you one thing I've learned in all of these 58 years and more, the demons are busy and they keep getting, and the older you get, the busier they get. I know that a lot of young people think as old people like myself, you probably don't have temptations. They are so busy. I'll tell you.
Absolutely. And that, especially for those who are struggling, those are the ones they really want to get off the track. The rest who aren't struggling, they don't pay much attention to. But for those who are strugglers, and Father Seraphim was a great struggler. Do you think at the end of his life, the Lord allowed him to go through that sickness as one last great struggle? What did you think? Did you have a crisis yourself? Like, why is God allowing Father Seraphim to suffer like this? Well,
I'll tell you one thing, that the abbess of the convent in San Francisco, Matrushka Mediana, had said to me one day, I was complaining, this ache, that ache, and she says, remember this, the more you suffer here on earth, the less you'll have to suffer in the hereafter.
Interesting.
So at times I pass that on. Sometimes I say, why do I hurt? Why is this? Why is that? Then I remember what she said.
And that's how you understand Father Seraphim's suffering as well.
Exactly. And I know that's how he felt about it, because we talked about it.
Sure.
I mean, Father, him and I, we would sit and we'd talk.
It wasn't no 15-minute talk either, man. It was like hours.
That's phenomenal. Well, I hope that this conversation has helped you kind of, jog your memory, because I'm sure there's tons of more experiences that you could share with us.
Oh, there is so much.
And maybe you need to sit down when they come to you now and just get a little booklet there and write them all down and make it into a little collection of sayings or a collection of memories that we could publish someday on Orthodox Ethos. We would like that. Yeah.
Let me think about that one.
Yeah. And we'll get Father Alexander to prod you.
What? Yeah. I don't know about all that now. You
can add she'll write something. You'll say, well, that wasn't 40 minutes. That was 2 hours you sat with him.
You kind of have to do that then. Yeah. So, but like I said, I think at the end that for me, my last statement to everybody is, I know what you read and what your conception is of Father Seraphim. He wasn't legalistic. He wasn't legalistic at all. He was very compassionate. He was non-judgmental. He was loving. He was understanding. And the big thing about it is ultimately at the end is, as even to the certain point of even Dostoevsky's spiritual father, and Father Seraphim was the same way. Don't lose hope, just persevere. To kind of to do that. And we have to stop looking at Orthodoxy in a very legalistic way. But we need to look at Orthodoxy with our true eyes open and our true hearts are open, of how loving and compassionate the church is. We fail. We all fail. But the church still, God still forgives us. Yes. And just the question is, just keep doing what you're doing.
Right.
And it's a grind. It's, that's a perfect, just a perfect thing I've been telling everybody. It's like, if I want to put Orthodoxy, if you want a description in my view of what Orthodoxy is, it's a grind. It's nothing pretty. You have to get up, you get dirty. It's just, you got to get up and you got to keep going.
The struggle.
It's just a
It's
grind.
struggle.
Yeah.
It's a struggle. It reminds me of it's one of my favorite sayings from the life, is where he was sitting with Father Herman, and Father Herman kind of had a moment of like, what are we doing here? Printing these books in the middle of nowhere, and there's so much work just to get one page. And is it worth it? And he said, something like, I don't remember if I'm quoting it right, but he said something like, thank God every day that I can kill myself for Orthodoxy. I can struggle, the struggle, in other words. He saw the struggle in and of itself as the heart of salvation. I think, and I remember a Greek elder Athanasius, said, in the struggle is salvation.
Yeah.
It's not like after the struggle salvation comes, but in the struggle itself is our communion with God is found. And so Orthodoxy is therefore very rightly a struggle, because that's how you come to become in communion with God, right? So
that's what I did as a kid when I was in Platina. It was child labor. What you made, in this day and age, what you made my kid work in the print shop, and it's like, that was like one of the best time I had. I get all greasy and, inky and putting Orthodox words together, and Father Herman said, can you put these together for me? He's like, Sash, can you put these books together for me? Oh yeah. I was like, yeah, I'm ready to do it, and chop it like this and kind of, and staple. Oh yeah. And then when I get doing that, now you can go make dinner. Yeah, let's go make dinner. You
love working. You love working for him.
Yeah.
So was it there were times it was just you three? Like you three at the monastery? Or just you and a couple of people there?
It's just the three of us. Yeah.
Wow.
And you kind of have to do that and get up and go to church. Yeah.
That would have been peaceful.
It was very nice. As a kid, I get to run around, do stuff, and cook, and work in the printing press, and get all inky. You didn't have to take a shower every day. What more is there,
And Mama wasn't around.
And Mom wasn't around.
unless there was a snake, then she came the next day.
Yeah, she came. Well, it took, you figure you had to mail it, so it was like 3 days to get there. So, and it's like, and only one day for her to come up there, get in the car, I'm taking you home. It's like, oh, okay. You kind of have to do that, yeah. So, but I loved it up there.
I was just up there about 10 days. Well, not even 10 days ago. We were up there, venerated the tomb of the grave of Father Seraphim.
Right.
It is so beautiful up there. It is so beautiful. Everything, the grounds and the peacefulness. My children loved it.
Yeah.
My children didn't want to leave from beside the grave. We did an akathist. And the Father. So it's a great blessing. I can just imagine what peace and quiet there must have been for you, and a joy for you to be up there back in those days.
Oh, you just run around and had everything. It was really nice. And I was really disappointed. Like sometimes when they have the lectures and there were people there, and I was like, oh man, this is like ruining me here. I get to be all upset for all these people around. It's like, oh, can't have fun now, kind of deal.
You're probably thinking, when are they going to leave, right?
Yeah, that's good for that. I was hoping, it's kind of to do that so I could stay in my czar's room. It's like, there's a kid. It was like the best room. It was, and they would all, and Father Herman was so good about it. And you're going to get the best room. Oh, you're going to sleep in the czar's room, and it's like, I ate all that up, something up with that bread and everything else, supping it all up. It was good.
Go ahead, Marina.
I was going to say, you go up to Platina every now and then?
Well, I don't go as much as I want, but I was there recently, yes.
Okay, next time you go up, would you light a candle for me?
Sure, of course.
Father Seraphim, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. How long has it been since you were there?
Since the funeral.
No, I mean one trip up after
the funeral.
After the funeral.
Last time I've been up there since the funeral.
Yeah. So it's in about 1982.
40 years ago, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because when Father Seraphim went, I hate to say it, that was the main reason I would go.
Sure. He was your spiritual father. Makes sense. Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking time, and it's a blessing for us to have you and the memories. And I think it'll be very beneficial for people who love Father Seraphim's memory. And, if you want to add anything later on, let us know, because we want to be a part of, supporting the memory of Father Seraphim and getting to know him for the American people. It's a great example for us in America. So many people have been benefited by him.
Right.
And to become, to go deep. I think he's a great example for us. How do we go deep and not remain superficial, legalistic, like you said?
Right.
We actually go deep. And so thank you very much for joining us.
Well, I hope we didn't disappoint you in talking and everything. So you can't do that. So
no, I think it was a joy. One of the great things I'm going to take away is how much joy the stoic, boring Father Seraphim has given you and everybody else.
Yeah.
I think that's a
Yeah.
great example, right? We have joy. Right. People think it's a grind, but you're full of joy at the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a mystery there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that's it. Well, like I said, I hope this there's a lot we can talk about, but time is time. And but these are things that Mom and we talked about and wanted to get out. It's like almost like a different side of Father Seraphim than what people think about, or what their expectations.
Well, it's good to dispel some myths we probably have or we've created in our mind from the popular culture as to what a saint. People want to make saints like almost inhuman. Maybe they think you got to be a saint, you got to stop being a human being, and there's a human side. But in fact, it's in that humanity that Christ became incarnate, right? So he doesn't want to get rid of that. He doesn't want to make it fake or make it less than human. So you've given us insight into the sanctity on the one hand, but the humanity which go together of Father Seraphim. And that's very helpful.
Good. I'm glad. Thank you, Father.
Thank you, Father. Thank you, Marina, and God bless. When good struggles and good summer to you all.
Oh, thank you. You too, Father.
Patron